Heated rivalry game in the ACC between North Carolina and NC State taking place on Wednesday night. That's Riley Davis. I'm Brian Rupp, both of HX CBB here on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel to break this down. Riley, we both live in the Triangle. This is a huge, huge deal here. I know this rivalry does not transcend the sport nationally the way that UNC and Duke does.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you could certainly argue that the vitriol in this rivalry matches that. It's a big game, certainly for NC State. They're a team that is looking to cement itself, both in the ACC picture and as an NCAA tournament team. They're 11-3, but have lacked quality wins to this point in the season. Did they just beat Virginia over the weekend? That's their best win of the season. They're looking to follow that up with a win here against the Tar Heels. But you and I have talked both on Heat Check and the Heat Check Hangout and here on other Sleepers Media YouTube videos. This UNC team's really freaking good. And I think asking NC State to beat them is going to be a tall task. So from an NC State perspective, what has to happen for them to pull the upset?
I think it ultimately comes down to DJ Burns. They need him to be able to stay on the court, stay out of foul trouble, and not be a defensive liability because he's their best offense. And I know we shared this when we did the recap of Clemson and UNC. Armando Bacot is playing some of the best defensive ball of his career. He completely took PJ Hall out of his game in that contest last Saturday. And it sort of represented a return to form from what Bacot had shown really since the Atlantis tournament into those following games against UConn and Kentucky, where it just seemed like something wasn't clicking. These last few games, he's gotten back on track. And I think, Burns still poses a really tough matchup because of his size, because of his footwork and his ability to get your best big men into foul trouble. But as a Carolina fan myself, and someone who follows the program very closely, it's something I feel good about, just knowing at least Bacot has seemed to reemerge as the defensive focal point for the Heels.
Yeah, UNC's defense has really improved over the last couple of weeks or so. It's something I wrote about in a Rauf report, the most recent one that's up on heatcheckcbb.com. Make sure you go check that out. But they've been playing at an elite level defensively over the last couple of weeks. And that's particularly come on the perimeter. NC State needs Burns to play well, but they're at their best when Horn and Taylor are out there making shots, and Casey Morsell's contributing in a big way as well. That's going to be tough against this North Carolina team, the way they've been playing defense on the perimeter.
Yeah, I will say, I think the matchup mainly, like NC State's chances, come down to Burns, but DJ Horn is someone who I think has had a better year than I would have expected when he committed to NC State. Looking at his numbers when he was at Arizona State the past 2 years, Illinois State before that, he sort of seemed like a high volume, low efficiency guy, which Kevin Keatts has sort of made a living of going after those guards. And sometimes you get a player who turns into Jarkel Joyner and just catches fire and can't miss. But I mean, there are other years where, you get random NC State guards like Torin Dorn, who was hit or miss. Braxton Beverly was hot and cold, like guys who are nowhere near as consistent as what he was able to get out of Joyner. So I think the jury is still a little bit out on what Horn can do all year, just because they've played a pretty soft schedule. Really have only been tested by BYU and Ole Miss. I guess Tennessee too in the non-conference. Don't want to short him on that. But yeah, so Horn has put up, he's currently shooting 43% from the field. Not as efficient from 2-point range, but still better efficiency than I sort of expected going into the year. But this is where it starts to get into crunch time. It's like you got to be playing your best ball here. And, I bring him up and even Jaden Taylor as well, just because, like you mentioned, both RJ Davis and Elliot Cadeau have ratcheted up their defensive chops as well. And I think Carolina as a whole is looking way more fundamentally sound on that end than they really have at any point, maybe over the past 3 or 4 years.
At the same time, like those guards for NC State have the ability to break down UNC's defense or anybody's defense because of their ability to create shots for themselves off the bounce. Like that's one thing that Kevin Keatts loves, is having guards who can create, and these guys can. Just a matter of if they will. Right. Like I think we saw against Virginia the recipe for NC State success. You had a good game from Jaden Taylor. He had a good all-around game from DJ Horn. Burns did not play his best. He wasn't really asked to, didn't necessarily have to, but you got a good performance from Dennis Parker. And you kind of have to have that third or fourth guy step up and be a factor, be a 15 point to 18 point per game contributor. I think NC State can. Like they have that ability. They're not super duper deep, but they don't necessarily have to be super duper deep. UNC is not necessarily either. If their guards get going early and are able to make some of those shots off the bounce, then I think we get in a situation where the upset becomes a much more firm reality. I did see a stat that this is the first time NC State and North Carolina have faced when both are 3-0 or better in the ACC since 1974, which was NC State's first national championship season. So if you're a Wolfpack fan, you have some history on your side there in that aspect. North Carolina, I know we've talked about them and their defense already, but what are you seeing from them as being the biggest key in this game?
For UNC, I think this is a game where I know RJ Davis's scoring production has gone down some in the last two games. He had 15 against Pitt, and he had 14 against Clemson after having a streak of 8 straight games with 20-plus points. I think you probably want to have him closer to that 20-point range because, NC State throughout Keats' tenure, you mentioned it, with the amount of guards they have and Dennis Parker's emergence, like he loves running those 4-guard lineups that can get out and run, get it in transition, and put up points. So I think it bodes favorably for Davis to get back into that 20-point range, or at least closer to that. So I'm looking for him to contribute. I'm looking for Harrison Ingram to get right as well, because he's been dealing with a wrist injury. First time all season these past 2 games where he hasn't scored in double digits. His efficiency at the rim has really tanked. He's had some shots rim out, and others just his touch has been a little bit off. So this is another opportunity for him. I don't think State has great size to throw at him on the perimeter. That's kind of been Keats's MO, is, he'll have smaller, quicker guys who can spread you out, but less so size when he runs those 4-guard lineups. So it bodes well for Ingram to be able to use his size to post up, to score around the rim, to get other guys involved. But yeah, I would say this is a big opportunity for RJ to kind of get back to his high scoring ways, and for Ingram to at least up his efficiency close to the basket.
Yeah, I was going to say with North Carolina, I think this is a game where the non-core players need to have a good game, right? It's at PNC Arena. We've seen UNC struggle at times going in there because the atmosphere can be an avalanche when things get going.
Let me stop you right there. UNC is 8-2 in its last 10 games against NC State. The 2 losses did come in PNC Arena, though. So
exactly.
That's little bit of credence there.
It's different. It's different in the Dean Dome. It's different in Chapel Hill. But playing in PNC Arena, that the 18,000 plus there, which NC State will fill out, can rattle teams. Rattle teams. So I will give them that, particularly when NC State's guards get going. Like I think back to last year where Jarkel Joyner kind of went nuts.
Yeah,
there was it felt like an avalanche in the arena. I was
right.
There, and it felt like an avalanche, and that can happen. UNC, and we've talked about this, put some mature performances on lately where they have handled their business. They have not given up giant runs. They have played stout defense. They've played to a standard. In order for that to be the case in an atmosphere like this, with a team that can get hot like NC State, you need the Harrison Ingrams to play well. You need L.A. Cadeau to play well, right? You need Seth Trimble to come in and make an impact off the bench. You need Cormac Ryan to play well. You need to have those guys that stabilize things. Yes, you need RJ Davis and Armando Bacot are going to be the 2 best players on the court no matter what. And those 2 can carry you. And if they have good games, then it really doesn't necessarily matter what everybody else does. But if barring 30 from either RJ or Armando, like you need that core group to stabilize you. And I think they can, but that's also, I think, where UNC has an advantage, is that the 3 through 7 guys in your rotation is a big advantage for UNC in this matchup.
Yeah, I think that's well said. The only other thing I would add is, even with UNC's record notwithstanding that, like I said, 8-2 over the last 10, it does seem like there has been a while since Carolina's just had a player that goes nuts in PNC. Like for 4 years, it was Marcus Page, and for another 4 years, it was Luke May. Like anytime either of those dudes just walked into PNC Arena, it was a guaranteed 30 burger. And I would love to see RJ Davis join those ranks. Like if he can, that's sort of I actually would have to go back and look at his game log against NC State, but like in PNC last year, he shot 2 for 13 from the
Yeah, it was
field.
he wasn't good in that game. Like he was clearly outplayed by Joyner last year.
And he played 40 minutes too. Like that's got to be fresh on his mind, thinking like, hey, it's time to get right. Now he put up 26 on them in the Dean Dome.
Again, the difference in this matchup in PNC Arena and the difference of it in the Dean Dome, it might as well be like two different teams playing in either of those games. In fact, this is in PNC at this point in the season, I think makes it very interesting.
Yeah, I will say I think this UNC team is great. I think they're legitimate national title contenders, at the very least, Final Four, good enough to make a Final Four. And they've passed several litmus tests recently because I think this is a team where when I watched them in the Bahamas, they started to have a feel of a good UNC team. And as being a fan for a while, like I think I have a sense of when a UNC team is good. I never really felt that way about Carolina last year, even before they went on that 4-game losing streak and never recovered. So it seemed like the Oklahoma game was a litmus test where it's like, okay, neutral court in Charlotte, top 25 team that might be a little bit overrated. This is a game where Carolina handles business, and they did that. Next litmus test going up against Pitt on the road. Like Pitt's had UNC's number in recent years, but a good Carolina team will take care of an inferior conference opponent even on the road. Past that test, Clemson, biggest litmus test in my opinion, I guess since maybe the Kentucky and UConn games, got a huge win on the road. This is kind of the next in line where it's like elite Carolina teams, because I said they are great. I haven't said they're elite yet. Elite Carolina teams, they get the job done in PNC, and a lot of times they sort of run away with it. So that's what I want to see. If UNC gets a double-digit win here, I'm going to be over the moon.
Do you think they do? What's your prediction?
I think they do. I think it ends up being like 85-74 would be like my final prediction.
So this is the third straight away game for North Carolina in a span of 8 days. They had at Pitt, at Clemson, now at NC State. Like this is a spot in the schedule where just from a schedule standpoint, they are vulnerable. And I think that you can get them. I still think North Carolina wins. Like this is the kind of game where you have the maturity that they do. They have the fourth most experienced team in the country, playing the level they are, playing the kind of defense that they're playing. That travels, right? You're not having the volatile offensive performances you've had the last couple of years. I think they find a way to get it done. It would not surprise me if NC State won this game, because NC State, I think, needs this game. And a win here would send, I think, the NC State hype train into a pretty good place. And the atmosphere is going to be rocking. They're going to. This is going to be the toughest place that UNC has played at so far this season. But I think UNC is mature enough to get the win. I think they win this probably by like 7, but it's back and forth for a first half. That's kind of how I see the game script going.
I could definitely see it being a back and forth first half, and maybe it stays close until like the under 12 or under 8 in the second. But that's when I think Carolina is able to summon a run, whether it's from, I mean, the key of the last couple of games has been a big Harrison Ingram 3. And I know I mentioned he's struggled some like inside the arc, but he's been doing that recently. And I can almost see it in my mind where it's either an Ingram 3 out of a Armando double team or an RJ Davis transition 3 and the floodgates to open and Carolina pulls away.
Yeah, I think so. Well, no matter what happens, we'll be back here on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel to break down the result of that and all the other big games around the country. So make sure you like, subscribe, and do all those things that everyone tells you to do, because those things do matter. We'll see you then.